All right, Anthony Albanese has claimed victory in Australia election 2025 and the Labour Party has won with 29 seats and the opposition leader Peter Dutton has now conceded defeat. Anthony Albanese, in fact, addressing party headquarters. Let's cut across.
Opportunity for our nation. We have everything we need to seize this moment and make it our own. And we must do it together, all of us, because for Australia to realise our full potential, for our nation to be its very best, every Australian must have the opportunity to be their best. To serve our Australian values, we must value every Australian, and Labor will govern for every Australian. Every Australian who wants a fair go at work, fair wages for their work and the right to disconnect when they're done with work. Every Australian who deserves the security of a roof over their head or dreams of owning their own home. Every woman who wants her contribution to our economy and society to be valued equally. Every parent who wants their child to get the best start in life with cheaper childcare and with fair funding for every student in every school. Everyone who counts on the National Disability Insurance Scheme. We will be a government for every Australian who wants to train or retrain for new skills and a good job at public TAFE. Every Australian who works hard for the life-changing opportunity of higher education and wants 20% cut from their student debt. Every Australian who knows that climate change is a challenge we must act together to meet for the future of our environment. And knows the fact that renewable energy is an opportunity we must work together to seize for the future of our economy. We will be a government that supports reconciliation with First Nations people because we will be a stronger nation when we close the gap between Indigenous and non-Indigenous Australians. And friends, we will be a government that relies and helps every Australian who relies on Medicare. Because this card This card is not Labor red or Liberal blue, it is green and gold. It is a declaration of our national values in our national colours. Medicare belongs to all Australians and together we will make it stronger for all Australians. Friends, I stand here tonight as the proud leader of an extraordinary team. I stood on the hallowed turf of the G this morning, doing live crosses making that point. I want to thank all of my colleagues, beginning with my friend, our incredible Deputy Prime Minister Richard Marles. No one could hope for a better deputy, and I thank him so much. My friend and our Senate leader, Penny Wong, and her deputy, Don Farrell, our economic team led by Jim Chalmers and Katie Gallagher, our campaign spokesperson Jason Clare, and we've got a bit of a shared party tonight, and Berkey's here, the member for Watson. My amazing Labor caucus, which when you look at it across the benches, it's representative of the Australian people. I acknowledge all of our fantastic Labor candidates in every seat who put up their hand, gave up their time for our cause and their community. If you excuse me for singling out one of them who ran for a third time in Dixon, Ailey Frantz. So many of whom will be joining us as caucus members in Parliament. I want to thank the people of Grayndler, most of whom are here tonight. I've got to say something, it was very special on the way here. There was obviously, I don't know whether there was a drone above us or what have you. My security team said, you know, maybe they're just out on the street. People don't just hang out on New Canterbury Road. And from Lilyfield, Leichhardt, all the way here,
All right, Anthony Albanese's Labour Party has secured the majority and won the federal elections. And according to latest poll results, with the 43.1% votes counted, Labour has passed 85. Australia's opposition leader, Peter Dutton, has conceded defeat in the general election. In a speech to supporters, the opposition leader said he has called Anthony Albanese to congratulate him for Labour's election victory. He also acknowledged that the Liberal Party did not do well in the election campaign and did not have the night it wanted. Dutton also lost his parliamentary seat to Ali France, a challenger from the centre-left Labour Party. In this election cycle, rising living costs and a nationwide housing crisis were weighing heavily on voters' minds. Sydney remains one of the world's most unaffordable housing markets, and both Labour and the Conservative coalition rolled out promises to ease the pressure. Adding to the complexity, geopolitical uncertainty, fueled in part by US President Donald Trump, has crept into the campaign conversation. More than 8.5 million Australians have already cast early or postal votes, a major jump compared to the last election. As the final ballots are cast, the outcome could shape Australia's direction on housing, foreign policy and economic recovery. Dr. Erin Watson, CEO, Waker and York is joining us on the program. She's joining us from Melbourne, is what I'm being told. Dr. Erin Watson, appreciate you being here. Good to have you. This is Vineet. Well, what does this victory mean for Mr. Anthony Albanese? In fact, this is a historic one, isn't it, for him? nobody has come back, with two subsequent terms in Australia since 2004. This is a great deal.
Yeah, it's a big deal. We've had very tumultuous few decades in Australian politics where the leadership, we have a Westminster system, so the leadership is decided by the party, and we haven't seen one prime minister come back and win another election in a couple of decades, and that's really exciting. Having said that, this is a little bit more of the same. We also haven't seen a one-term government for 90 years, since the 1930s. So this idea that this was anything unusual is not actually the case. In fact, it's quite the opposite, where if you look at it historically, the idea of a one-term government is not something we've seen in Australia in a very long time.
Right. What do you think, Erin, actually happened with the opposition in this case? There were a lot of telltale signs that, they were making overtures that threatened Medicare in Australia. They were talking about, actually conceding to some of the demands of Donald Trump. Nuclear reactor plants were also being discussed, which to a lot of voters seemed, un-Australian, for the lack of a better word.
Yeah, look, that's a really good point, like around things that are un-Australian. And the first thing I would say there is actually about Medicare. So Medicare, no matter if you're on the left or the right, is seen as a fundamental piece of Australia's architecture. Like, you cannot run a campaign in this country that is anti-Medicare. This idea, Labor typically does this. They say, the coalition and the Liberals are going to dismantle Medicare. It's fundamentally wrong. The Liberals actually came out and made the same commitment on Medicare. I'm married to a doctor. I hear about this all of the time. I think that this happens frequently in Australian elections, where Labor come out and attack Medicare. I think what's more important is around energy policy and these differences that you will see in something like energy policy, so whether you've nuclear or renewables and so on. But when it comes down to it, if you look at what's happened, for the first time in Australian history, an opposition leader has lost their seat, which is what we saw in Canada just recently as well. The opposition leader has lost their seat in Parliament. And it says a lot, one, about the individual. It says a lot about the broader policy environment. It says a lot about the campaign. And I think that the campaign, I said this earlier on NewsX World today, at the end of the day, when it comes down to it, it was a poorly executed campaign. 3 or 4 weeks ago, I actually said you could see a Peter Dutton Prime Minister, you could see a Peter Dutton government. The reality is that the policies and the costings were announced too late. The policies and the costings were really overshadowed by issues like childcare arrangements, like working from home arrangements, which overwhelmingly affect women, and women have a big part of the vote here. So those sorts of things really played against Peter Dutton. So I think it says a lot about Peter Dutton as the individual, as the leader, having lost his seat. But the other big pointers are very much about what happens historically here in Australia.
And Erin, there's also another salient aspect of this election, which is in fact very, very surprising. And that is that there has been a generational shift in the way people vote in Australia, with younger voters this time outnumbering baby boomers for the first time. How would you describe that? That is something that Australia has not seen in the past.
Yeah, I mean, you would historically see that the issues that won elections were the sort of issues that impacted what we call the baby boomers here. So I was in Western Australia a couple of weeks ago, and the thing that a lot of people were talking about in the regional areas where there are large older populations, they're concerned about the fact that Anthony Albanese wants to bring in unrealised capital gains tax. So you have to pay tax on capital gains that you haven't actually seen. And they're really interested in that because they have invested in their superannuation or their pension funds based on a certain regulatory environment, and then all of these years later that's come under attack. So I really understand that from that perspective. But now we see this shift where demographically we have a lot more younger voters. Now, it's all well and good to say that young people might vote more progressively or whatever, but I think that's a little bit too simplistic because we don't actually know. I don't know, or maybe, you know, we need to be able to disaggregate these data to look at how different age groups actually do vote. And then I'm really interested in the age data. Making assumptions about how young people vote without that is, I think, you know, it's unhelpful. So we do need to look at that, right? I think that's a really interesting piece. And the problem then adding on to that is that idea that the Liberal Party or the coalition, which is both the Liberal Party and the Nationals in Australia, the way that they work together, is that they are inherently older, more conservative. Whereas, you know, when you look at the unique phenomenon about Australia is actually around the teals and independents. Like if you speak to anyone around the world, that's what's interesting. We have this big increase in independents, and those independents are backed by certain people and whatever. My view is that a lot of those independents should have been Liberals, and it's the Liberals who alienated these types of voters. And what are those voters? I would say middle, upper class women, upper class women who are professionals. They also have families. They also care about socially progressive issues. And that became your teals and your independents. So the teals are a particular group of independents backed by Climate 200. So when you alienate that group of people and they've gone off on their own, it kind of splits, right? And you can actually see in, say, for example, Kooyong, which is a seat in the inner eastern suburbs of Melbourne, which Josh Frydenberg, former deputy leader of the party, former treasurer, former future prime minister, he lost that seat. He should never have lost that seat. Instead, an independent teal former surgeon won that seat. She should have been a Liberal. But
Right.
the party alienated that group of women. This is where we're at. And
All
now
right.
it's fragmented. That's what's unique about Australia right now.
Valid points, Erin. In fact, Jitarth Bhardwaj, founder and managing editor of the Australia Today magazine, is also with us on the show. Jitarth, appreciate you being here. Well, another achievement that the Albanese government credits itself with is the fact that they have been able to improve relationship with China.